Okay, this video is about an experimental reporting tool from Mint that is designed to help find trends in discretionary spending. First, a bit of background. I started using Mint in 2009 because it solves the update problem. You give Mint all your account passwords, so yes, it takes a lot of trust, but then you just forget about it. It automatically downloads transactions from your bank and other accounts and aggregates them into a single database with no expiration date. It also attempts to categorize all your expenses. There are mistakes, of course, but in general, it works pretty well. So now I have 9 years where all our financial transactions have been logged and categorized. Maybe now I can figure out why we spend so much money. In the Trends tab here, Mint has a report on spending by category. By default, it shows everything. You can restrict the data for the chart in various ways. One way is by selecting certain categories or transactions. You can also decide to add or remove certain accounts that you have, or select a time frame. Let me check last month because we just moved into May. So this is April. I've got a lot of taxes, obviously. The chart is interactive, so let's pick shopping. And that opens up a new pie chart for just shopping, which consists of two things. One of them is the subcategory shopping, and the other one is clothing. Let's take a look. Let's see. Let's take a look at the transactions in clothing. All right. Is this a lot? I don't know. Let's compare it to last month. So the month before that, which is March. So I'll have to go to a custom. I'll pick the first and last day of March. And here we see clothing is much smaller. So what is the real trend here? Is there a trend? Or is there a pattern? Let's look at clothing over time. So I have to type it here. Select it, and then to get a view about what's been going on, let's look at it at all time. All right, so here we see a very clear pattern. There are a number of spikes. When do the spikes occur? December 2010, December 2011, December 2012, 2014, 15, 16, and 17. So December, this one, which was 13, is split into two, so it goes between November and December. So we see that we buy a lot of clothes at Christmas time. It's presents. I didn't know how big that was, but there it is. So the interface that we're looking at here is, oddly enough, we see just a giant donut for clothing. The interface now is pretty nice. It gets you some ways. The problem I have is here, where you tell it which categories to select. I really don't want to select a category to show. I want to remove some categories so I can see the rest more clearly. Why is that? I want to separate discretionary and mandatory spending. Mandatory spending is rent, mortgage, loans, bills, insurance premiums, utilities, and some other unavoidable expenses. These are things that are hard to change. You have to switch jobs or move. They're also boring, usually the same amount every month. Most of them are on auto pay anyway. So if we set them aside, the rest will be clearer, because I'm really interested in the other categories, the things that are under our daily control, things we actually decide to buy, sometimes with very little thought, discretionary spending. All right. So here's a list of the categories that I had to remove from my data in order to get a look at what is really discretionary. What I really want in the Mint interface is a drop-down here for all of the categories, or an ability to say none, and then list the categories I don't want to see. If that feature were here, I wouldn't have bothered to do what I did, but I did. So let's take a look at that. So here's the experimental interface I was mentioning. It's experimental in the sense that there's not a complete design for it yet. I've taken the easy choices everywhere. But over here on the left, you see a pie chart, this time for only discretionary spending. Let's see. The discretionary spending is whatever's left after removing the boring categories. For this month, you see most of the big categories. There's groceries, shopping, clothing, and restaurants. There's a fifth big category, usually a cash and ATM, but we got by without cash in April. So the big categories in this month take up almost 3/4 of this spending. The interface lets you move easily from month to month, so you can use these buttons here to go back. Here's the previous month, the month before that, the month before that. You can also use this, you can use the keyboard, so the left and right buttons work. Boom, boom, boom. And this little ribbon here lets you jump randomly to any particular date that is covered. On the right, we have the detailed transactions for the selected category. And that's, let's see. So there's no pop-up. There's no need to lose your context in an effort to understand it. You can see the graph and the detail behind it on the same page. It's just there. Now, the stacked bar chart in the middle needs explanation. This is giving us information that's missing from the pie chart. The problem with pie charts is that although they do a good job of showing the distribution in percentages of a whole, they can't really tell you anything about the whole itself. All pie charts kind of look alike. The bar in the middle here complements the pie chart by showing the absolute dollar value in each category. When it's tall, we're spending a lot of money, and when it's short, we're not. So it prevents a misunderstanding that can happen when you see that a smaller expense is shown as a larger slice of pie because the overall spending is down. Finally, I already showed you can do the left and right arrows to go through next or previous months. There's also the other keys, the other arrow keys up and down take you to different categories. So here I've dropped into clothing, restaurants, etc. So the idea is that you can browse the 68 times 109, 7,412 pages without a mouse surfing it. Okay, so let's take a look at some recent months. Go back here to now. So April had 2 birthdays, which is why there was a lot of spending on clothes. That's the way it works here. Let's go back to March. In March, there was almost nothing for clothing, but there's a big chunk in air travel because we bought a plane ticket. But however, overall spending was lower than in April. If we go back and forth, you can see that the spending, the vertical bar there, has gone down. In February, let's take a look. Here's February. There's no plane ticket and no real clothing purchases, but the other top 5 categories were well represented here. And let's go back to, in January, here's another plane ticket that happened, but other things were lower. So, in fact, spending didn't grow that much. Finally, back in December, of course, that was Christmas. There was a lot of clothing purchases. Altogether, the top 5 account for 3/4 of all spending. So the idea here is that each month has a very different look to it. It all depends on our behavior. The idea here is something like the dieting concept of writing down everything you eat. Just being made aware of what you're eating can have a positive effect on your eating behavior. But this, in this case, is so much easier. With almost no effort on my part, I can see exactly how we are prioritizing our spending. And knowledge, of course, is the first step to changing behavior. Okay, so that's it. The code is available on GitHub, but I have not yet set it up as an online tool. Probably won't, because who would trust my random website with their financial data? If you can work with React and SQL, feel free to grab the code. It's lightweight, only a week's worth of work, and it's not hard to deploy. I'm running it right now on a Mac Air 2012 with 4 gigs of memory. If you're not a developer, you'll have to hope somebody from Intuit sees this video and decides to implement the feature. In the meantime, I have what I've always wanted for managing my personal finances.